Okay, so yesterday we started talking about something. Do you remember what it was? Yeah, we talked about NumPy yesterday, and today we are going to talk about a similar but a little bit more advanced library. It's called Pandas. So Pandas is built on top of NumPy. Okay, so just like NumPy takes the basic list and creates an array on top of it, Pandas takes the array and creates data frame and series on top of it. Okay, so they all build on each other. So again, you can always check the documentation in the homepage of the library. Okay, and it's almost always that you have something called Get Started or Start Here, in which you can find how to install and the basic first steps. Also, you can find the source code in a GitHub repo. So almost all the popular libraries of Python are open source. So you can just see the code and contribute to it. Or just see the code for the sake of learning. Okay. All right, so that's built on top of NumPy. So understanding of the array is needed to understand the basic data structure in Pandas. All right, so again, you need to install it. Now, so far, we are just using the general install, pip install, and then the name of the library, which would give you the latest version of the library. You can always request to install a particular version if you want to. We're going to look into that a little bit further, a few weeks from now. But for now, whenever we need a third-party library, a library that is not it's already not plugged in, we're going to need to install it. All right. So we have the library installed. Now we need to understand the basic data structure or the central data structure that the library have, and everything builds on that central data structure. We have two of them actually, but if you're gonna look into which one depends on the other, so the series is the most basic, and then the data frame is just a collection of series. So pretty much the data frame is the real central concept. Okay, so data frame is just like a two-dimensional arrangement of the data in which you would have a column and a row. Okay, and obviously the meeting of the column and the row is the data cell. But what differentiates the data frame from a two-dimensional array is that you can add meaning to that data. So you have these labels to introduce meaning to the data that you organize in this two-dimensional data frame. Okay. Now, just one column with the labels of each row is what we call the series. Okay. So when you try to access the first column, and I mean the series itself doesn't have a label for the column. Okay, it has labels for each item, which pretty much the row. Okay, when you put multiple series together, you would have data frame. Or when you have a data frame and you try to access one column, it will come in as a series data type. Okay, so this is how it would look like. We are talking about collections of data, so obviously the list is one way to initialize these collections of data. So this is how a one-dimensional list would look like, and the series could be built on top of it. Now again, when we import the library, there is a popular short alias for it, which is the PD. So it is pretty much well known, even if you don't see the import line here. When you see something like PD dot, it's the convention that this is part of Pandas. Okay. So now here, when we try to access the data through the list, we use the index, right? Now, when we create a series based on that list, now the series creates an n-dimension array, nd array, and turns it into a series. Okay, now when you get to print it, it will print like this. We know that it is an nd array because the d type is one of the properties of the array. Now, yesterday when we talked about the properties of the nd array, we talked about the shape and the size. Okay, the D type is the common data type that was detected automatically if possible. We know the list doesn't have any connection to the data type or any tracking of the data types of its elements, right? Now the ND array tries to find the most specific data type that applies on all of its elements, because it uses that data type for optimizing how to deal with the data. Okay, so if all the data are ints, it would be int 64. If all the data are strings, then it will be a string. If we have mixture, it doesn't mean that we are restricted. If we mix strings and numeric values, then the general data type will be the general object. Okay. Now, as you can see here, we didn't specify labels for the rows in the series, so therefore the indices were used as labels. Okay. Now, if we want to add meaning, so that we wouldn't be, it is possible to get confused when you have just numeric indices, like location-based references. Now we can use replace the numeric indices by more meaningful indices by sending a list of these labels in the parameter that's called index. Okay. Now we see it is meant to replace the index, the numeric index. However, used to and still so far, but in the future it's gonna change. We can still use the index, the numeric index, based on the location, even though like we replace it by these labels. But the location is still like, I mean, the first location is 0, the second location is 1. It's still known, and we can still use it to access the elements using that index, the location-based index. In addition to using the label, obviously, using the label is much easier, especially when the analysis gets complicated and when you get to deal with more and more complex data. Then this meaningful labels can be much can reduce a lot of the confusion that can happen if you're using the index. All right. Now, if we are going to replace the numeric index with a label-based index, now this is new. It will give you a warning that this is going to be deprecated in the future. Okay, so only you'll get this warning only when you replace I mean, when you try to add a label. You don't try to add a label, it doesn't give you this warning. Now, another way to define the series without having to send the value in the parameter, the index parameter, you can define it using a dictionary. Okay, so the dictionary, the label would be the first, the key would be the label, and the values would be the actual data cell. Okay, so that would result in something exactly pretty much the same as the one that we created based on the lists. It might be more convenient to use dictionary to send it, and you can access the elements the same way. Only you just have to be careful with using the location-based index, because it's going to be deprecated. Now, when you see some example code, or maybe you ask ChatGPT to generate some code for you, ChatGPT is it's not least updated. So you may get older versions of a code. It's good for you to know how to update it and fix these little problems. Okay, now let's try this out really quickly. I'm gonna start